Welcome into the Medical Spa Insider, presented by the American Med Spa Association. This week, AmSpa founder Alex Tiersch reconnects with Alex Lirtsman from CorralData and Tyler Weinberg from Aviva Aesthetics to discuss how their companies partnered together to harness the power of data.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the program. Alex Tiersch here, and this is Medical Spa Insider, the podcast that the entire aesthetics industry looks forward to every week. And we are very excited to have on the AmSpa hotline today. We've got two guests today, both who have been guests in the past. The one and only Alex Lirtsman and Tyler Weinberg. Alex is with CorralData. And Alex, you and I had a conversation, going on a year ago. I think it was post MSS last year. So I want to say April of last year. CorralData runs an AI kind of data collaborator. And it does a lot of really cool things, including using natural language. And it's had a pretty cool impact on the aesthetics industry. I don't want to mess up what you do, so I'll let you explain that. And then Tyler, Aviva Aesthetics, which has made, I think, a pretty cool impact from the private equity side on medical aesthetics. We also have a podcast with Tyler, and I think your partner was on that as well, where we talk about, you have a very unique kind of different approach for how you address private equity in med spas, where you allow kind of a different ownership, kind of transactional way of folks working with private equity, which I thought was really cool. And you're also in Chicago, which is great. So before we get started, we're going to just kind of get an update on what you both are up to, talk about AI and data, and collaborating and connecting data across multiple platforms, especially when you're talking about roll-ups and you're joining different med spas into one platform. Before we do that, let's just get a quick update, because I don't want to make sure that I didn't butcher it. Alex, we'll start with you. Quick little Reader's Digest version on what CorralData does and what you've been up to lately, and then we'll go over to Tyler.
Yeah, so CorralData literally corrals all of your data. So we work with
Corral.
in the aesthetic space specifically. We have most of the major roll-up platforms are using CorralData to connect their various sources. So EMR systems, analytics, QuickBooks, Sage Intacct, sort of you name it, all their marketing, ad, attribution data, all of that data goes into Corral. We then allow you to have all of the reporting that used to be disparate all in one place. And then you could slice and dice this data however you want, chat with this data. And then also leveraging AI, we're also giving you recommendations of what you should do about it, right? Like, so we have three types of customers. We have customers that are just show me reports. They're sort of used to like this old school BI kind of a model. And that's a fraction of our customers that like to do that. We have some customers that just go in and they just ask questions and really sort of like interrogate their data. And then we have another group of customers that what they really like is waking up every morning, literally being told what's going on and what they should do about it. And, you could sort of like switch based on how much time you have in the day or what's important to you. But yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And are you only working with kind of the roll-ups, or do you also work with kind of single location folks like that, or is your platform primarily built for that type of business?
It's primarily built for we don't just service the aesthetics industry, but in the aesthetic space specifically, we mostly work with multi-location providers, right? So that's where you start to get like, I think in the beginning, when you were running even like one, two, or three locations, like that fragmentation of data of that complexity isn't going to put your business under. But when you're sort of like I would say when you get to three and up, operational excellence is everything. And then that fragmentation almost compounds where if you don't have the ability to do this with your data, like you cannot scale, you cannot grow. So that's where we focus most of our time.
Good. Sounds good. And Tyler, same question for you. Aviva Aesthetics, I know you're relatively new to the game and you've got a kind of a new model, which I thought was really intriguing. Again, folks should go back and check out both podcasts in the past, but give us an update on what you've been up to and what your business is and why it's different.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me again, Alex.
Of
Always
course.
good to see you. Aviva is effectively a platform that's built by med spa owners for med spa owners. And like you mentioned, it's quite a bit different from the traditional private equity backed platform. But because here, the med spa owners keep control of their business, full clinical and business autonomy. They keep the financial upside, all while getting the back office support and a path to an exit that they're looking for. So we find that med spa owners can make 2, 3, 4 times as much money working with us without having to give up control and getting those synergies and economies of scale. And feels like just yesterday when we were talking, but it was almost a year ago, I think, when we filmed that
I
podcast.
know.
It was like last February, I think, came out in April.
That's crazy.
And now we have 10 locations as part of the platform. I'm expecting to grow to 25 by the end of this year and 50, pretty soon after that. And yeah, excited to talk about some data and talk about Corral.
Yeah, and I guess to kind of get started, I think the best way to lay the groundwork for what we're going to be talking about is Tyler, starting with you, like what was it? What was the problem? Actually, both of you, what was the issue that you guys got together on and said, you know what, this is something that we need CorralData for. Here's the problem that we're facing. And then Alex, in response to that, you know, how did you come in? And I know you did a case study together, so I'm curious kind of what the genesis of this relationship was at the beginning, and how you all got together. Tyler, let's start with you as to how you kind of found what Alex was doing and what you were kind of trying to solve that led you to him.
Sure. Yeah. So, under having data is important, but then being able to analyze and understand data, especially across locations, like Alex was talking about, is really crucial. And as we think about building a sophisticated platform and being able to have real operational improvements for our partners, being able to compare data across different locations is really important. And how people measure things and look at things, even just name things, is different. Even if they're using the same system, where a lot of our med spas are using Zenoti, who has great data, but they may call something, Botox versus neurotoxin versus something else. And so we knew data was really important, and we're thinking originally about building our own custom data warehouse and reporting. That would have taken a very long time and been very, very expensive. And actually, I'm in West Lafayette, Indiana today at one of our partner med spas, Pure Regenerative Medicine. And one of our board members, who's one of the owners of Pure Regenerative, was listening to a podcast. It may have been the previous AmSpa podcast or something else, and said, "Oh, I think this company can help solve a problem that we're looking at." And that's what brought us to Corral. We did a pilot for a couple months. That was really successful, and honestly was, better than we had expected. And it's just been a great partnership. We're still just kind of scratching the surface, and really excited to operationalize some things this year.
Yeah. And Alex, I know you've got many of these platforms kind of that you've partnered with. I'm just curious when folks like Tyler and his group come to you, what's the first thing that you're looking at? I mean, are all of these problems very typical, or are they all very unique and different?
I think they're starting to get like we're starting to do a lot of pattern matching on this, and that's sort of
Mhm.
like the value that we really provide is just like the fact that we standardize a lot of the stuff. So like we have processes in place, like Tyler was talking about, like categorization. I would say like even if everybody runs Zenoti, and Zenoti's a big partner of ours, we're the official data and analytics provider for Zenoti, right? Like so when but we still work with like all the other EMR systems. Like, but the issue is even if the EMR system is the same, like Tyler said, the categories could be different that people are using. So when you try to actually normalize this data, when you try to understand utilization rates or margins or your COGS or anything that actually moves the business, right? Like I think that's when you get into the situation where standardization is absolutely critical. That's one piece of it. And then the second piece of this is just how do you sort of like have all of these platforms work together, right? Which is, I think, one of the things that we look for when we're starting to have a conversation with a potential customer is like, well, how fragmented is this data, right? And sometimes it can be at a level that it's like absolutely too fragmented, where like the things that they're trying to get out of it is just like, well, I want to optimize to LTV to CAC and send this data back to the ad platforms. And sometimes that is, for most of our customers, that's possible. But there are some customers that's like, that's just not possible based on how your data is stored and processed. And then we have to go back and say like, okay, let us actually help you retag, build all the data models, everything else. So like even with sort of working with Tyler's team, it's just like as they bring on new practices, it's like, well, how do we make sure that all of the tagging is in place as well? Because it's not just as simple as just like getting the reporting working. It's like if the underlying data isn't set up properly, there's not much we can help with, right? So that's the other piece of this.
And what does that mean when you say tagging and setting up the underlying data properly? Is this a huge undertaking when you come on and try to onboard somebody where you've got to go back and because that's what I'm envisioning, especially for a group that's got 10 locations, you've got 10 different systems, you've got 10 different people that are operating the books, 10 different accountants, 10 different bookkeepers, whatever it is, and you've got to try to integrate all this. How do you do that? I mean, I know that's what you do, but maybe this is a stupid question, but how do you go about doing that? And what's the process for that?
I think like by now, it's just like we've standardized it so much. So like we really just like most of our work is like the nuance, right? It's
Ah,
extracting out of people's heads what are all of the exceptions that they've made along the way. And some people have a lot of like exceptions that they make to their commission structure, right? Like we
yeah,
pay these people this type of commission, but these people we pay this type and then these locations we grandfather this commission structure. So there's a lot of like ambiguity, and then putting it all together sometimes could be a challenge. Or on the tagging piece of this, it's maybe Google Analytics isn't really working together with their EMR system, right? Like, how do we retag that? And by now, we just have almost like think about this as like a massive checklist. And this checklist has hundreds of sort of like pieces through this onboarding process to make sure that, and none of this is like even like, all of this is like pretty seamless and effortless to a customer. But those are the pieces that we need to put in place to make sure that somebody is operationally like efficient. Because if you were trying to do this on your own, you almost like you don't know what you don't know, right? Like
hmm
you have to like fail a few times, and every time we catch an exception, we add that to sort of like essentially our onboarding stream of all of the things that are necessary. So I would say by now, pretty cut and
yeah,
dry, but sometimes we'll catch an exception. We're like, okay, we need to add this to our process.
gotcha. And Tyler, what are you like? The biggest kind of pain point in terms of this integration that you were looking to solve? Was it like, were there certain types of KPIs that you're like, this is what I've got to get my head around this? Because private equity, and correct me if I'm wrong, private equity, no matter what industry you're in, you're dealing with this. I actually was at a legal summit where we were talking about integrating different technology when you had different brands coming in under a certain private equity group because and as you get bigger it gets more difficult because some of these brands they'll be fully integrated with something, so it's kind of like you're used to doing this anyway, right? But was there a certain type of information or data that you were really hankering to get at that you just couldn't solve that allowed that CorralData allowed you to get at, or what was kind of the main impetus, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I think the main goal was it's not about any one piece of data. It's about having all of your data and being able to compare across locations, right?
Yeah,
If we had one or two locations, we could do this all manually. While it'd be a little bit tedious,
right.
it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But when you're talking about 10, 20, 50 locations, all of a sudden you have to run each report, do an analysis, then put it into it's just can all of a sudden take days or weeks of a person's time, and that becomes very expensive. So it's really just having everything in one place. And then, I get an executive summary, I don't know if it's every day or every week, with kind of key data points as well, where, everybody can get a kind of a message with the key data points that they're focused on, and having that whole process automated. It's not necessarily that it's doing anything that we couldn't do on our own. And that's what most software is, right? Even like accounting based software, you could do it all on your own. It just is not as easy. So that's what Corral does, is it makes it a lot easier, a lot more efficient. And instead of having to have a person whose full-time job it is to do this, or maybe multiple people,
Yeah.
we use Corral. And that was the main reason for our excitement. And then going into, all of the different integrations, right? I mean, we focused on Zenoti and Google Analytics, but looking at some other call tracking softwares and Meta, Google Ads, things like that. Understanding marketing costs. I think we're still, again, just very early days with all of that. So excited
So
to
tell me,
see.
like, as the CEO, and obviously you divulge what you can. Um, you said that you kind of getting this report almost every day. Like, what is being summarized for you? Like, what does this look like in practice when you get this thing on your desk? You're saying, oh, is it primarily numbers related to profitability? Is it related to cash and revenue coming in? What are some of the things that you're tracking? You just mentioned things with marketing. What are some of the things that CorralData is actually corralling for you? Because that's where I think what you just mentioned, it gets really, really interesting when you can start pulling in social media marketing data, all of those different things,
Yeah.
um, easily, and make it speak, English, for lack of a better word. I think that's where you really get interesting. So what does yours look like? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, look, I think it's a little bit of all of that, right? So looking at each location, and seeing how they're doing from a revenue perspective, and are they growing year over year, month over month? That's kind of like the first thing to just make sure that the growth continues to be there, right? And then it's thinking about cost levers, and are people, labor, and consumable costs, and especially labor, are people being utilized, or rooms being utilized, things like that. And then, marketing is a really big piece in this industry. So thinking about how much does it cost to acquire a customer, that's what I was talking about with CAC, and then, how long somebody stays, and how long, to get a new customer, what their value is over the lifetime of that customer. Those are all things that, we have different KPIs for different businesses, and we're able to track those. Eventually we're looking to have kind of a friendly competition of rankings of certain KPIs, between the platform of, okay, hey, you are top 10% in this, but your bottom 10% in that. And it gives people, having data in isolation. If you don't know what a good pre-book rate is, then you might have a great pre-book rate and think it's bad, and you might have a bad one that you think is great. So there's a lot of things that are still in the works, but yeah, it's a great
Awesome.
solution.
No, and Alex, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think like sort of where Tyler's team is also like taking this is just like again, like most of our customers, they've already sort of like hit this, like, oh, they hit this level of scale, and then they're bringing on a platform like Corral, and like we're literally seeing Tyler's team scale so aggressively and so quickly, and then use all of those sort of like best practices of just like, well, yes, we can recategorize a lot of things in Corral, and just like having sort of like all of those KPIs in place. So when they are even sort of having those like early conversations, I'm assuming like it's also like they are already sort of like trained in like what good data is, and what good data hygiene is, and how a potential location or a potential practice looks like on the platform, and sort of like what good is, right, for them already. So I think that's the part that I think is like, at least from my perspective, sort of like seeing Tyler and Tyler's team scale on Corral is like really, really interesting, because they're sort of like they've really started from like a few locations to go up.
Yeah, and you mentioned that before we jumped on, is that your platform, Corral, tended to, you work with a lot of the folks, a lot of the platforms, and you've gotten a lot of them after they were already scaled, and you jumped in with Tyler and his group when they were young and just kind of budding. And so you've had both of you really have had the ability to kind of measure progress and kind of develop this as you go. I mean, you touched on that a minute ago. What's been the impact of that and what are you learning from that? Because, you're not, this isn't your first rodeo, right? Aviva Aesthetics is not the first one you've done, but it sounds like through Aviva Aesthetics and what they're doing, you are able to maybe glean a little bit at least different or unique learnings than maybe you were in the past. I'm curious what that's been like.
Yeah, I think sort of like when somebody like when we sort of came in, right? Like they're still defining what their definitions of KPIs are, right? Like so
Yeah.
like a lot of this is also like we've had to I think where we the big learning for us is just like how are we sort of like a partner that is just like, well, we could do it this way. Here's a few like best practices that we could bring. Like there's no like I think what's really great about like how open-minded Tyler's team is just like they're like, hey, we can absolutely go down this path. Here's sort of like a best practice that actually does work really well, and sort of like using that wisdom of crowds of just like what is working, and then they have an incredibly fresh take on this. It's just like, well, these are the KPIs we really care about, and sort of like working with them in an incredibly collaborative way versus I think a lot of times when we're going at sort of like somebody has like 50, 100 locations, they already sort of, this is how we've been doing reporting all along. It just doesn't scale anymore. We need to move to Corral. And then they have everything already sort of like pretty much pre-aligned. And then like we're coming in as just like sort of on this like collaborative execution level versus
Yeah.
just like true partners. So
Yeah.
I think our team really appreciates working with Tyler's team in that regard. So I think that's been the awesome part.
The Medical Spa Show returns to the Wynn in Las Vegas April 9th through 12th. Every year, MSS is where the best come to get better. Over 100 educational sessions, a sold-out expo hall filled with more than 200 potential brand partners, and networking events that bring together the most supportive community in medical aesthetics. Friends of the pod can save $100 off their registration today with the promo code INSIDER. That's medicalspashow.com, promo code INSIDER. We can't wait to see you there.
Promo code expires April 9th, 2026 and only applies to primary registrants. Cannot be combined with any additional offers. Learn more about this event at medicalspashow.com.
Tyler, is this primarily a tool that you are using kind of at the top level, or are you having all of your kind of managers use it as well, kind of on the local clinic level?
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things about it is it's really both. And a level in between. We actually just hired a VP of operations whose job is going to be working with the practice managers at every location and helping to align on what are the right KPIs for that practice, and help coach them on, first of all, they need to have the data and then they need to be able to actually, act upon it, sharing best practices across the platform and other things like that. So, it's so easy to use. You just go, it's all cloud-based and you just go to, web browser, very intuitive, very, it's almost like too much data in some place. So I think sometimes like kind of narrowing it down to kind of, hey, this is what this person needs to see. Because if it's too much data to me, it's probably too much data to some other people too. Yeah, I mean, everybody should be looking at it. I mean, ideally in the long run, we even have, providers that are having their KPIs and looking at it. We haven't gotten to that level yet. Everybody should have their own data that they're looking at.
Yeah, for sure. What's next with this? Like, what is, that's kind of a loaded question, I realize, but like with CorralData, you're in other industries, so this isn't the first field that you've broken into. What is this supposed to look like when it's kind of a fully formed, AI human? Like when this is all done and you've got it built out, and Alex, what's your vision for how this works, and or is that just kind of being built as you go? Because it's kind of like we're in this new world where we're all still trying to figure out where the limits are of all of this, and so it's exciting, but at the same time, you got to have a vision to run a company and to build a company and to scale it. So what are you looking to do? Like what's the vision here?
Yeah, so like when we started out, it was just like, how do we make sort of like anything you could do with data effortless, right? And I think we were starting out like AI was just hitting the scene. And so
Yeah.
like we're on our end, like the entire platform, like all the reports are AI built, all the question answers, everything is sort of like, if it wasn't for AI, we wouldn't have a company. Like it just wouldn't be possible, practical or possible. But one of the big things that we're sort of learning is we're starting to allow customers to act on their data. So like when we were talking about LTV to CAC, right? So we have LTV to CAC data in the platform by, let's say, by first provider or first campaign. We're sending this data back to the ad platforms in the HIPAA compliant way. So you can optimize your marketing to LTV to CAC versus an appointment that might or might not show up, right? One of the things that like we're starting to learn from that experience of it's a data platform, can answer any of your questions, give you recommendations, tell you exactly what you need to do is like, well, our customers were starting to say like, okay, how do I create processes to act on this data? So like we also work with a ton of CRM platforms, right? Where this data gets sent back to a CRM. So somebody didn't show up for a neurotoxin, but they used to show up. How do we make sure that they're getting that CRM notification and somebody on a practice level knows to call somebody that doesn't have an appointment booked, right? Now what we're starting to see and act on is like, well, we can send this data. What if we are not just only making these recommendations to send this data? What if we're allowing you to act on this within our platform? And if you thumbs up, because that's how our platform learns, it's reinforced learning through human feedback. So you press thumbs up
Right.
when we give you a good
Right.
recommendation or a good answer, whatever. We're starting to now do that with our recommendations where you can act on this data. So I think where this is going is you will, if people trust the robots at some point to act on this data, some parts of your day to day, such as like optimizing your campaigns, staffing, figuring out which emails to send and who to send it to, like you will start to essentially automate more and more of that out. And that's really what we probably spend 50% of our R&D isn't just to give you any answer you want of your data. Most of our R&D right now is actioning that, right? Like, so figuring out based on this specific location, what are sort of the main things that they need to be doing today, giving you those recommendations, allowing you to approve them, and then having our system act on that. And I think that's where the world
Yeah.
is going either way.
Yeah. I mean, so Tyler, I guess the question there's someone driving in their car right now going, "Oh my God, I'm going to lose my job in a few years because I'm going to be replaced by a robot." Um, I'm curious, what is, I don't know if you ever get together in your, private equity breakfast club or whatever and talk about AI and say, "Hey, how are you approaching AI? And are you, regardless of anyone wants to admit it, we're all looking at it for in a way for cost savings, for efficiencies. For me, I'm constantly pushing against the, too much information. I've got too many ideas. I've got too many things to do. I need to cut through that and create, I think what Alex you're saying is exactly right. Like, what are those things that can be done automatically as a result of the information that you're getting? How are you looking at not just CorralData, but just AI in general? Is it cost cutting? Is it efficiency? What else is it? What is this going to be, just trying to automate and have robots run as much as we possibly can? I don't know. It's again a loaded question. I'm curious what your general thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not an AI expert, but I do think that I look at AI very much similar to like any and all technologies, right? I mean, if we think back to like elevator operators, right? Everyone thought, what are these people going to do, when they lose their jobs, not that, or ATMs or things
Yeah.
like that. I think the power of humans with technology is always going to be greater than any one, technology or humans themselves. So I think it's really important that people that are in this industry or in any industry are learning about different solutions and how to use them effectively. But I think it's much more about efficiencies, not necessarily cost cutting, but just making the people that you have more efficient with the tools. That maybe that means you need less people, but those people I would think would be more highly compensated because they have additional skills and are able to be more productive. I still think we're quite a ways off from, that. I'm really excited to see what happens. And look, I mean, if AI can solve all of our problems for us, then, maybe there's some other, a lot of good things are coming out of that. Even if people don't have to work, maybe that's a good thing. People can just do what they love.
I have a sneaking suspicion that it will not solve all of our problems, or it'll solve a lot of problems and then it'll create a lot of other problems.
Yeah.
I mean, Alex, what do you think? Have all your problems been solved?
Not yet, but I do sort of like I've essentially automated as much of my life as I possibly can. And the
Yeah.
things that you can't really automate yet are taste. And taste is really hard to automate, right? Like sort of like still. And then nuance
Well,
really,
and what do you mean by that, though? Break that down a little bit.
I mean, you have to model so much to get like sort of like, and especially what is this email that is going to be going out? What does this ad creative look like? These are sort of like harder things to solve for
Yeah.
now. I'm not saying that they won't be solved for, but taste I think is important. And then the other piece of this is like nuance, right? And we spend a lot of time working on nuance. It's like AI is pretty useless without like good data, which is what a model is, right? A model is a bunch of data. So like so Tyler's team has a bunch of data. We could build models off of it to predict any level of behavior, or most behavior, right? And we could make recommendations based on previous trends, right? I think and that's essentially where the world is going towards. But if you don't have every single bit of like nuance, or like if you use ChatGPT, like what you would call custom instructions, right? There's sort of like little behavioral, like little quirks that you probably wouldn't want to like trust to the robots yet, unless you sort of like fill in all of this. And that's where we spend a lot of our time, is like, what is that level of nuance that somebody needs to understand about like the aesthetics industry as a whole to be able
Mhm.
to answer a question incredibly thoughtfully. So like the things that we care about are accuracy is number one, but we've added helpfulness scoring on all of our evaluations of all of our AI answers, because I think like we've reached a point that like accuracy is sort of like more or less a solved problem. Helpfulness isn't, right? So like
Hmm.
we that's and we're getting better and better. And if we're getting better and better, I think like the industry as a whole is just going to get better and better of just like having the models be like foundational models actually answer questions in an incredibly helpful way, not just in an incredibly accurate way.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, we're bumping up against time. I want to ask you also, just kind of, it's a little bit off topic from AI, but I'm just curious, just from a general, whenever I get a platform, or private equity backed platform, I'm always curious, what's your thoughts on kind of the future of the market right now? This has been the last couple of years, but this past year has been, 2005 was pretty, 25 was pretty choppy for a lot of folks. We're continuing to see consolidation. We're starting to see, um, you know, some of the fruits of that consolidation, right? It's some of these platforms are no longer just kind of brand new. We're starting to test out the model and see what it is. What's your kind of thoughts on where things are going, and how the private equity model is working, and is this trend going to continue? What's the next step, and what do we look for next?
Yeah, I mean, how I think about this industry is it's in the typical kind of maturation stage where, it's not brand new, it's not fully grown and fully mature, but, there was a lot of new entrants over the last couple of years, not talking about platforms, but just people opening med spas that maybe worked in a med spa and have now realized, a lot of them, that owning a business isn't everything that they thought it was going to be. I
Mhm.
actually just got a notice from one of our partners that a pretty large group was, I believe, closing 20 or so locations. So we'll see about that. But I think that getting through these challenging times for the existing operators, is going to just be better on the other end, because the industry is growing, but same store sales may not be growing or kind of flat, given that there's new stores that are opening constantly. And I think that we're still, in terms of consolidation, very early days. I mean, it's not everybody even necessarily understands about a platform and what the benefits are. I really love it. And the more that people know about the exit options, that's really our mission, is to demystify private equity. I don't really consider what Aviva is private equity, but more of an alternative to private equity. And the nice part is that, our message is really resonating with the industry, and, our value prop is only going to get better, as we keep growing. So excited to have software like Corral and other partners to continue to add value to those med spas.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think right. And Alex, you've dealt with other industries as well. I mean, is what Tyler's saying kind of ringing true with you? Is I feel like there's some real truth to that. I think med spas aesthetics in general has a long way to go before it's fully mature. And it's also changing so rapidly with all the different treatments and different types of things. So what are your thoughts about the future?
I think it's earlier on the maturity curve than like we typically see in other industries. So like I think, and our view is very myopic, right? It's sort of like through this like data lens, but I don't see any other industry like we sort of like collect the benchmark. It's actually we use your benchmarks from AmSpot to sort of like see growth, and we know that locations that are on Corral are growing 7 times faster than the industry average. And we're not saying that Corral is the reason for this, and maybe we have something to do with it, but I think we don't see this in any other industry. And that just means that there's sort of like a ton of low-hanging fruit still in the industry of operationalized excellence, right? And so like the stuff that Tyler's team is doing is really focused on this, like how do we get operational excellence that might not exist on a single location level, right? And I think that that's obviously like there's the value of just like, hey, rolling this up and there's a higher multiple and everything else, but it's also like, well, what are all of the best practices, right, that you could also add to make sure that you have a higher LTV from your patients, that you're spending less money to acquire them, that you have higher utilization rates. All of these things are what makes a truly repeatable process. And I think that that's where, when we're looking at sort of like the aesthetics industry, we see a ton of room still when we onboard the customer, even if they have, let's say 50 locations, we still see like this massive gap. Whereas in other industries, if we're doing that same level of integration, same amount of locations, like yes, like there is an opportunity for them to move in their maturity, but a lot of the best practices have already been like executed on. And so I think it's an amazing industry just for like that level of just like arbitrage between like where most of the industry is today and where it could absolutely be with a little bit of like elbow grease and like tightening a few things up. So I don't know. For me, it's very exciting to see this.
Yeah. That's good news for you though, Tyler, right? It's right. I mean, there's a lot of and I think it's true. I think it's accurate. I think that operational excellence that Alex mentioned, we're not even close to being there yet. And that's what I think, the combination of business expertise, growth platforms that you bring, as well as some of the technology tools. I think, that's where it's at. Happy to give you guys the last word. Tyler, what, final thoughts? Also, where can folks find you if they're interested in, and by the way, I remind everyone, please go check out both Tyler and Alex's previous podcast. They both were earlier in 2025. But Tyler, final words, let me know where folks can find you, and then final thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you can certainly find us on our website and reach out that way, or through social media, primarily Instagram, which is Join Aviva. And yeah, I mean, just really looking forward to continuing to grow the company and building out more and more services. So looking forward to meeting everybody who's listening sometime soon.
And you will have at least some representatives at Medical Spa Show in April, from what I recall.
Yeah, we have a booth, and myself and Audrey Neff, who's our CMO, will be there, and probably a couple other people from the team still working all that out. So looking forward to being there as well.
That's awesome. Audrey's awesome, obviously. So great catch there, by the way. Alex, same question. Final thoughts. Where can folks find you? And
CorralData.com. I would encourage everyone. Like, we have a ton of content available of just like what are the best KPIs, like that we're sort of seeing people measure, like how should they be measuring things. And I think my final thoughts are just like, you don't have to be a big roll-up brand, even if you're single location. Just like building your business like you're planning on selling it one day, and just like operationalizing some best practices is not something that you need a platform like Corral for, but like you should sort of like whatever you can do to get into that happen. But yeah, check out CorralData.com, book a demo, and would love to meet your listeners at the Med Spa show. So
can't wait to see you guys there. We are going to be having, we're working on our next industry report, industry data reports that's going to be coming out. And can't wait to see you both in April at the Win. Looking forward to it. I appreciate your time. It's great to catch up with you guys. We'll have to catch up again here soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you to our producer, Madeline Moeller, marketing content coordinator, who organizes the podcast schedule and guests and provides topics and talking points. Audio and video editing, voiceover, graphics, and platform management is provided by myself, Derek Hawk, Digital Marketing Supervisor. Our themes are provided by Maka Music. Thank you for watching or listening to the Medical Spa Insider podcast. Please follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for future episodes. Ratings and reviews are greatly appreciated. For more information about the American Med Spa Association, visit americanmedspa.org.
Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by AmSpa. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance in the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity that they represent. AmSpa provides this podcast as a full service for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.
And as always, thank you for listening to the Medical Spa Insider. Remember, compliance is cool.